Okay, guys, we're all familiar with feeling stuck, lost, empty, disconnected, or overwhelmed at times in our lives. We know the desire to break free of emotional turmoil, to find true inner peace, and to live the life we are meant to live. My guest today is a Sedona based adventure travel guide turned spiritual guide and meditation teacher. We're going to talk about that career transition whose guidance invites us to explore the art of meditative self-inquiry and self-realization. With over 40 years experience guiding people into stronger, deeper, and more vibrant relationships with themselves, their work, and the world they live in, he's dedicated to helping his clients and students step powerfully into their full potential as they learn to trust and embody their innate perfection and brilliance. We're just going to mention this now. He also has a gift for you guys today. We're going to talk about what that is exactly later, but it's a collection of curated guided meditations that will help you deepen and expand your meditation practice. But without further ado, welcome Chess Edwards to the show. Thanks for slowing down with us, man.
Thank you, Mitch. I love the name of the podcast. It's just so much what this work is all about is slowing down. It's really good to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I first started the podcast, throwing names around, I'm like, what could be more simple than just slow down, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, let's start here. What an interesting career path you've taken. You spent 20 years as an adventure travel guide, exploring all that the beautiful world has to offer, and then turned to looking inwards as a different kind of guide, a spiritual guide, a meditation teacher, saying that you needed to heal from an inauthentic and conditioned life was your motivation for that switch. Now, most listening, I would imagine, are going, adventure travel guide, like that sounds freaking awesome.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah. So can you talk about how you felt you were living an inauthentic life despite this externally just cool career by all accounts?
Yeah, beautiful. I love that that's where we're starting. Yeah, because it's I think really important for us all to recognize that a journey is a long one. It's a long arc. And one of my favorite quotes is, "We do ourselves a great disservice when we compare our insides to other people's outsides." Like
love it. Yeah,
we're looking at they're putting on the scene, the costume, and looking really good, and inside we know our own foibles and our own anxieties, and they're pretending they don't have any, and so I was pretending I didn't have any for a long time. I spent a good 25 years of my life wandering the planet, leading treks in the Himalayas and river raft trips up in Idaho, and whale watching and sea kayaking trips down in Baja, and safaris in Africa.
Wow.
And everyone said the same thing. They were like, "Man, you've made the right choice. You clearly have your act together. You got it made." And what they didn't realize, and in fact, I know I didn't realize it at the time, the reason that I was going out to the wilderness was it was the only place where I felt at all safe. I would rather go risk avalanches in the Himalayas on these long solo treks than risk being in relationship with people.
Wow.
I had enough trauma and abuse and betrayal in my young life that it created an identity of myself that was just scared to death of making any sort of a mistake or showing any sort of a vulnerability to others that might elicit another experience of abandonment or betrayal. So I didn't trust men. I didn't trust women. I didn't trust me. I didn't trust love. So the wilderness was really the place where I felt a bit more at home and safe. And it was really a refuge. I was escaping people and going out to the wilderness.
Right.
The other dynamic of it was that I could be the guide. So I could be in control of the relationship, and all my relationships were probably not much more than about 2 weeks long, sometimes 3. And I could maintain that separation, that distance, and play the role of I've got my act together and I'm in charge. And then when it really started to get real, it was really convenient. It's like, well, trip's over. I guess it's time for you to go home.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it. And the other part of it was that I recognize now that I was always tuned for beauty and truth.
Mm,
I was always tuned with a sense of exploration, and I've always loved going places where I was unfamiliar,
mm,
I was uncomfortable. I needed to learn how to move in a new territory, getting familiar, getting the skills about how to wander through the Himalayas, and then going back and getting people. I'd come back to the States
mm.
and I'd gather up groups and I'd say, you got to come check this out. I have found
Right,
one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and I would love for you to know it as well. And they'd say, well, I don't know how do I go to Nepal? It's like, I'm a guide, so I can guide you.
right.
And what I'm finding, Mitch, now is that I'm doing the exact same work.
Wow.
It's just that I'm now going on an inward journey and again discovering some of the most beautiful places I've ever discovered, and really unfamiliar territory in a lot of ways. And then coming out and then going and getting people and saying, I have found one of the most beautiful places,
Come with
and
me.
it's
Yeah.
called your heart.
Right.
And I can help guide you to
Mm,
this beautiful place.
wow. I love how you, first of all, you've it like two roles that externally look so different, but in the facet of you are guiding people to these beautiful places, they are not so different, right?
Right.
Um, and I also find it super interesting that you said that you felt at that time when you're an adventure travel guide that the only safe place was on these crazy excursions and expeditions in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And when you say safety there, I would think what that means is like emotional safety to express um, your vulnerable true self. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you got it. Exactly. I didn't feel safe being me in the world. And I didn't know that at the
Mm,
time. I just had no idea what the real me was. The
right.
only me I knew was the me I'd constructed in my own mind over a lifetime of some challenges. So it was a me who didn't feel lovable and worthy and just felt constantly on the edge
Mm.
because I was always examining, God, did I say the wrong thing, or did I do anything today that might again elicit this abandonment, because I never want to feel that again.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah, I resonate with that. So let's dig into this emotional piece and getting in touch with our emotions and feeling safe to express and let's say
Mm,
put words to these emotions. So I know
yeah.
you have an emotional vocabulary builder tool on your website,
Mm,
uh, which is very cool. And I noticed that myself over the past 5 years or so, that I was really not in touch with my emotions at all. Very much like what you described, in that it was this place of like just looking for short term relationships, so that I don't have to open up, and just this fear of doing that,
yeah.
and of in the moment being scared almost of my emotions, having no idea what the heck each of them is.
Yeah.
Just knowing that I'm feeling something, and then if people ask, I just go, "Oh, I'm good. I'm all right. I'm okay."
Yeah.
um, which really hurt me in connecting with people on a deeper level. So, what do you think the value is of? Well, first of all, can you talk a little bit about what the emotional vocabulary builder tool is,
Yeah.
and what do you think the value is of developing an emotional vocabulary?
The tool is a pretty simple tool. It's just a one sheet, two sides. And on one side, it has at the top of, I think, 5 columns, a classic word we might use to describe our state of being. And on one side, they're the more, positive words. On the other side, they're the more what we would call negative or difficult words.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
So on the positive side, at the top of one column, it might say happy. And on the top of the another one, it might say peaceful.
Right.
And what then underneath the word happy, there's all manner of, giddy, excited, energetic, enlivened. So words that get more kind of juicy about what we're really feeling. On the other side, fear might be at the top of one column. I
Hmm.
feel, fearful. But what is that? And there could be underneath that, there might be the word unsafe. There
Hmm.
might be the word vulnerable.
Right.
And how much more beautiful to be in relationship with ourselves and others. And when somebody says, "How are you?" to be able, instead of saying, I'm not so good, right?
Mhm.
To be able to take a moment and say, I was actually journaling about that this morning. How do I feel? Lately these days, I'm feeling lost, or I'm just feeling this sense of disconnection. And I don't know what it is. I don't know much more how to say than that. But boy, doesn't that start a conversation?
Right.
It
So,
builds that intimacy in our lives, because now the person's going, "Oh wow, that's interesting. Now tell me more."
right, right. So essentially, you say the value of being specific about what we're feeling, and developing a vocabulary around how we're feeling in the moment invites intimacy
Exactly.
with
You know,
ourselves, probably, and with others who we're expressing this to.
that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Um, and it also gives us the more rich palette of what this life is all about. I mean, part of the beauty of this human life is to be able to feel and accept and be with the full range of emotions. So we can explore, what is it, to feel, mischievous. That, like, imagine starting a conversation with that. Somebody says, "How you doing?" You go, "I'm just feeling really mischievous."
I'm up to no good. Yeah.
They're absolutely going to lean in and go, "Well, tell me about that." And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what this life is about, is to explore into our full dimensionality.
Hmm. And that's a good point, I think, is that if we all think like, when people ask, "How are you doing?" and
Mm.
I say, "I'm doing okay. How are you doing?" and they say, "I'm doing okay." How many times has that conversation escalated to any sort of intimacy? Typically, at that point, you probably change the topic. You're like, "Oh, did you see the game last night?" Like,
Right.
but if you, like you say, bring up something like, "Oh, I'm feeling mischievous," or I'm just feeling like hurt right now. Maybe being super honest about, like, even if it's not an emotion that's very kosher to put showcase to the world.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's inviting some deeper connection and intimacy with those people.
Well, we also recognize that yeah, that's exactly right. And we recognize that, if we listen to our conversations, especially that first 10 seconds, "How are you?" "Oh, I'm doing good." "Really? What's up?" And immediately what we go to is, "Why am I doing good? My relationship is doing well. My job is
Mm,
going well. I've just, redecorated the house." We go to the external.
mm,
"Why am I doing good?" "Well, let me point to what I'm doing in the world." And it's a different conversation when we say, "How are you
right,
doing?" And it's like, "You know what? I'm doing a lot of self-discovery these days. I'm
right,
really recognizing where I'm thriving and where I'm scared in life." And we keep it within the realm of, like, what they want to know is, how are you doing? Not what are you doing, but how are
right.
you doing?
So interesting, and I think that same notion applies in when people ask, "Tell me about yourself." We default to, "Well, I'm a teacher. I enjoy salsa dancing, and I like watching this sports team."
Yeah.
But we don't tell them anything about who you actually are as a human
Right.
being, which is just super super interesting.
You and I were talking yesterday about men's groups.
Yeah.
And one of I ran a men's group for about 10 years when I lived in San Diego. I've got another one here in Sedona. And one of the beauties of it is that we go around, and we already know what we all do, right?
Right.
We've been
Right.
together for 10 years in this men's group. So what we talk about is what's on our hearts.
Right.
And what a beautiful thing to start every conversation with, looking at your beloved friend and saying, "So tell me, what's real for you right now? What's happening for you right now?" And
Yeah.
for that person to be able to say, "I'm at this place in my life where I'm kind of confused about some things, and it's a little bit scary, but I'm also kind of excited."
Right.
You
Right.
know, that's what if we could have those kind of conversations with people who are acquaintances,
Yeah.
and it would give them the permission to go, "Oh, wow. this is kind of nice. Maybe I'll open up and share a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And imagine if we were doing that constantly, maybe not all the time. Nobody's perfect,
Sure.
but how many deeper connections you would have in your life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, before we move off the topic of identifying and expressing what emotions we're feeling, you have an analogy with wine tasting that I just love. I ate it all up. So can you just take us through this analogy? I guess it doesn't have to be wine; it could be craft beer, it could be anything. But I just found it hilarious how truthful it is.
Well, it's yeah, wine or craft beer. That if somebody said to me, or you, describe, you just tasted a glass of wine or a sip of
Hmm.
wine.
Yeah.
I'd like to know about it. I really would. I'm curious. I'm interested. I want to know what kind of relationship I might have with this wine. Am I going to like it or not? And what if we just looked at them and went, tasted the wine and went, yeah, it's
It's
good.
okay.
like, come on, man, give me more. So we apply to things like wine. You look on I used to work as a waiter, and they've got these wheels of all of these descriptions,
Yeah.
to really pull out, what am I actually tasting? It's a red wine. Oh, there's some really rich plum, on the front end of this. And then it starts to shift a little bit. And I get a little bit of a chocolate, kind of a bitter chocolate taste. And now people are going, ooh, I am actually learning about this wine. You're describing it in such a way that I'm really curious, and I think I want to try it. I think I want to
Mm.
have a little bit of that. So we apply that nuance to something like a wine, but we don't do it to our own state of being.
Crazy, man. Yeah, absolutely crazy. And I went on a wine tasting probably a couple months ago in the summer, and we were trying these white wines, and the guide said that the white wine, he's like, you will note notes of tennis ball skin with this wine. And I think that which just had us all going like, what the like, I didn't note that, but
Yeah.
that is the kind of detail that we should strive for when we're describing what emotions we're feeling in the moment. Like there's the standard tennis ball skin.
Yeah. Well, if I'm in a relationship with somebody and I'm actually being as communicative as I can be in exploring what I'm feeling and the nuance of that, and then I let my partner know that.
Mm.
Then later on, when we're having another conversation, it's so nice because they can go, "Oh, that relates to what you were saying earlier.
Ooh, yeah.
Thank, like I understand you better. I like you got upset about something I said, but earlier today you were telling me that you were feeling really vulnerable and raw. So I understand now. It's maybe not all about me. You already
Mm.
told me you're feeling raw, so
Right,
that
right.
gave me a heads up."
That's so true. We could go down the rabbit hole of communication and how just
That's
being open about what's going on in our lives would avoid a lot of conflict in communication. But
Yes, it would.
if we had 4 or 5 hours, maybe that's what we'd talk about.
Right. There's much more.
Okay, so let's get back to the kind of parallel between your career as a adventure guide and now as a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
um both of these things, one of the parallel, obviously you drew to the parallels of you guiding people through these experiences. Another parallel that kind of comes to my mind is that in adventure there's something about just pushing past a level of comfort,
Mm.
a maximum level of comfort that you have with yourself. And meditation and exploring the spiritual in my mind is not much different. It's you're constantly
Not
pushing
at all. Exactly.
that level of this is what I'm comfortable with. Can you talk about that a little bit and any parallel you saw there?
Yeah. That's a great question. So anytime we're exploring something new, it's basically exploring an edge. So as we expand, as we grow, we're going to be finding ourselves always at a leading edge from moving from what is comfortable into what is uncomfortable. from
Mm.
what is known into what is unknown. And edges tend to be a little bit rough. They're sometimes sharp. So we can expect that if we're doing any sort of real growth and exploration, it's going to be a little bit frightening and uncertain.
Mm.
If you travel to a place you've never traveled to before, yeah, absolutely, you're going to show up, and there's going to be some amount of being on edge or apprehensive about, I don't know what's around the next corner. I've never been here before.
Mm.
In our spiritual growth, what we're doing is we are actually accessing a self that the ego self has no idea exists.
Mm.
So, just to back up a little bit, the ego self is the self that we have constructed in our mind, our story of self over a lifetime.
Right.
Because when we were toddlers, we didn't know who we were. The mind said, "Who am I?" And so we started to construct a self based on what does mom say, dad say, society, etc. So we've got this egoic self that we call me. Most people, that's the only self they know.
Mm.
And then we start to go on this path of exploring and looking into, wait a minute, there's a different me. There's an eternal essence of me. It's called consciousness. And if that starts to come online and starts to become more present, available, and we actually start to rely on it as a guidance system, this egoic self is going, who's this? Like we're moving into territory that is unexplored,
Mm.
that is unfamiliar. It takes a certain amount of faith, like travel does, right? Travel
Right.
takes a certain amount of faith. So there's a faith aspect of our growth. And I think it's important for people, for all of us to remember that our spiritual growth is going to be rough at times.
Right.
But hey, if you want to go explore a vastness beyond anything you've ever imagined before, you're probably going to have to, start to be okay with the unknowns
Mm.
and meet the parts of you that are scared to death and say, what are you doing? This is unfamiliar. This new you you're introducing is a total stranger.
Mm.
And you're starting to give power to this total stranger. And then watch the ego body
Yeah.
resist.
The ego is going to fight back in one way
Oh,
or another.
you bet. And it's not malicious. It just
Right.
doesn't know. The only self it knows is the self that it created.
Right.
So it is literally trying its best to keep, quote, we say to keep you safe,
Mhm.
but it's really not. It's just keeping itself safe.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Mm.
That so interesting. I love that you went to the difference between consciousness and being consciousness and the ego for that answer of going into places of discomfort.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like if you're, it's no different than if you're going into the Sahara for an outback adventure. It's not all going to be roses and whatever the saying is, flowers and roses. It's,
Yeah.
there's going to be some struggle. There's going to be some hardship. But that makes the experience, that makes the adventure. It wouldn't be that without both the, rewarding times where you're like, wow, this is awesome. And the times where you're like, wow, I don't know if I can make it through this.
Exactly. And every adventure I've ever been on has been an adventure that has challenged me, scared me, hurt me at times.
Hmm.
And yet, because I got that perspective, because I was in a whole new way of seeing and relating to the world.
Yeah.
And also, when we go traveling, all of our senses come alive. Like we become hyper aware of what's going on around us.
Right.
So, on a meditative journey, we become hyper aware of what's going on within us.
Hmm.
And that allows us to then have that perspective of being able to look at our egoic self from a little distance and go, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, I can see why I've been suffering. I can see why I've been struggling, but you got to get outside of it to see with some fresh perspective. Just like traveling, you go traveling and then suddenly you're looking back at your life at home and going, oh, I am so quitting my job when I get home.
Yeah. That's why people say, yeah, I went to Europe for a few months. I found myself. And they come back, they quit their job. They make changes in their life. It's literally because of that.
So what we're doing is we're getting away from our programming, our habits, the things that we're typically so familiar with that we're just in a state of reaction,
Hmm.
with our lives, and we're just doing the
Yep.
habitual thing.
Yep.
So I look at meditation as every meditation is an intentional interruption of the habits of our mind.
Ah.
Every meditation is an intentional interruption of the habits of the mind.
Hmm. So, okay, I'm curious what you mean by interruption, by that term,
Mm.
as in as you want to stop the autopilot of the patterns of the mind. Is that kind of the, like, pause them?
Yeah, exactly. It's taking a moment to say, if I wasn't constantly thinking in the habitual ways I'm thinking,
Right.
what would happen? What would be there?
Hmm.
If I interrupt my typical unconscious, patterned, conditioned story about myself, what would happen? Who would
Right.
be there? Who would be there under the story, beyond the story? So it's one of my favorite inquiries in a meditation is just to sit and let the mind ask a question that it can't answer.
Hmm.
So what I mean by that is there's a teaching that says uh, you can remove a thorn with a thorn, which means if I've got a thorn embedded in my arm, I might go, God, I need something sharp to get that thorn out. My fingers aren't doing the job. And I look over, I go, oh, there's another thorn. Perfect. So we can use the mind to
Ah,
actually imagine beyond the mind.
right.
So we can inquire, what if, what if I didn't have this whole story of me? What if I just didn't? What if I didn't have the constructed story of me that I've created about my worthiness, my
Hmm.
lovability, my value, all of that, that's a story I've been making up for a lifetime just based on, again, what I learned about myself early
Hmm.
on from others. What if that wasn't there? And then the question is, how would that feel?
Right. Right.
Not what would life be like if I didn't have that story, because then the mind goes through all sorts of, well, I couldn't survive and I wouldn't know what to do. But if we just ask, what would be there? What would it feel like
Yeah.
if I didn't have a story of me? Would I disappear?
Right. Oh, I love that. That is the death of the ego right there.
Exactly,
Huh.
exactly. And we want to make sure we don't want to kill the ego because
Hmm.
we need it.
Right. Right.
We just want to put it down long enough so that a true self can start to emerge and awaken, an authentic, prior to conditioning self.
Yeah.
And when that starts to awaken, then we can let the egoic identity come back online in a more
Right.
humble and harmonious union with our truth.
Ah, okay. I love that distinction. Don't kill the ego, you say. And I know when we were talking yesterday, you had this concept of a spiritual badass, which I loved. Love
Yeah.
the term.
Yeah.
And you talk about how you don't need to be a monk to live a spiritual life. And I guess um, I don't think that monks necessarily aspire to not have an ego, but in some ways it's to minimize the effect of it. But you seem to have a bit of a different take in that you think the ego has a place, and that all these societal concepts do have a place, and we just have to learn to coexist with them in a different way. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. That was fun yesterday, that conversation. And I don't know that I've ever used that term before about being a spiritual badass. Um,
Love it.
So it's going to be different, of course, for everybody in all paths that anyone wants to journey upon for their level of or experience of awakening
Mm,
uh, are valid. I have found that for me, and I find this true for many others, that it's scary to think about. Wait a minute, I do want my pure liberation. I want to awaken as the absolute essence of me, my divine nature. And I recognize that's going to take a meditative devotion.
Mm.
And I recognize it's going to be a journey of study. But that often gets confused with, yeah, but I don't want to go live in a cave, man.
Right.
I
Right.
don't. And I got kids and I've got this life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of being a spiritual badass is that's really where the rubber meets the road. Like I can go sit in a cave and meditate all day long without
Mhm.
any temptations of life, without my egoic self being triggered,
Mm.
without being lured into attachments and needs, and giving the ego treats that it's going to latch onto. Yeah, I can go do that in a monastery. I can go do that in a cave somewhere. But what a powerful thing to actually live in the world of form, with
Right.
relationships and temptations and addictions and all the things that can mm, pull us back into the limited sense of self.
Yeah.
Um, and to meet those and to have the wherewithal to actually live in this world and notice where we're still triggered.
Mm.
I mean, and I don't know for certain, but I'd imagine that a lot of, a pure monk, again, off in a monastery, is probably not doing a whole lot of their childhood wounding work.
Right.
You know, there's this aspect of opening up the divine essence of being, which one could say is learning what true love really is.
Mm.
Learning that love is not a concept, love is not a state of mind.
Mm.
Love is just the essence of being, of God consciousness.
Right.
And if we can come to rest in that, then let me go through this world and let me see where I'm still triggered. Let me see where where I still feel anxious or small or fearful.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee that's part of my childhood wounding that is arising to say, I'm here to be loved. I'm wounded
Right.
and I want to be loved.
It's all we want is love, right? At the end of the day, we're just
Yeah.
craving love.
We're craving love. So let's actually awaken into what real love is, the unwavering grace of love that's not dependent on any condition. It's just love.
Mm.
And if we can awaken that within ourselves, then when my wounding comes up, it's just that my 10-year-old child showing up and saying, I'm hurt and I'm scared. And this
Mm.
moment that just happened triggered that.
Mm.
And there it is. Well, if we're awakened in the pure essence of love and grace, we can kind of rest in that and say to our own wounding, okay, come here, come here. I got you.
Mm. Mm.
I got you. It's okay. Let me show you love because that's all you're craving. Let me
Mm.
just show you love, heal you with love. And then that 10-year-old goes, oh, wow, I'm healing. I'm not so scared anymore. Oh, I feel better.
Mm.
Okay. And the next time that trigger happens, that 10-year-old isn't wounded anymore. So they're
Right.
like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I think I so can you dig into that a little bit more around the concept of self-love? In
Yeah.
that I think when a lot of people hear what you just said, perhaps they're mistaking it for self-love in a traditional sense of creating this construct as you talk about of love and directing that towards ourselves. But that is not the case here.
Right.
Can you make that distinction?
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, any type of love we can give ourselves is awesome.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
there's that. Um, when we're talking about loving every part of ourselves, accepting every part of ourselves, for most, that is a mental activity. Remembering, oh wait, no, I gotta love that part of me. Why? Because, and we go through these mental,
Mm.
rememberings. Oh, because that's here to teach me something, and that's just a part of me, and everyone's like that, and everyone's got their stuff like that, and I do too, and therefore I can accept that I'm that. So we go through these, mental mm, uh, affirmations, if you will, or exercises
Yep.
to arrive at a state of acceptance or love. And awesome, if that's what you're doing, like that's better than not, right?
Right. Totally.
You betcha, do that. But now we're talking about what if, and again, this is the nature of the work that I do and the spiritual awakening of what we really are.
Mm.
We're just an individuated expression of divine consciousness, which is love.
Mm.
When that's awakened, we're resting in love as love, and it's not an activity of mind anymore.
Yeah.
I would almost say it's a state of being, but it's not even a state of being because states come and go.
Mm.
It's a beingness. And then everything that arises is met naturally with love as love. We just know ourselves to be love. It's unwavering. It just is present.
Right.
Anything that arises in it automatically meets love. We don't have to go through mental exercises to get back to love.
Yeah.
One of my favorite teachings that I learned from one of my teachers was allowing is not an activity of the mind. Allowing is the very nature of our being.
Interesting.
When we are embodied as consciousness is in a constant state of allowing. It's the witness. It's just witnessing.
So in that way, you would say that allowing is our natural state of being, and that when we're operating day to day, typically we're doing things that get in the way of allowing, but allowing is just getting back to our natural state of being.
Yeah. And this is a little paradox in this. Yes, that's absolutely true. Allowing is our natural state of being. Peace is our natural state of being. Stillness is our natural state of being. Love is our natural state of being. Now, within that, we are having a human experience.
Right.
So just this morning, I was journaling about this. I was doing something here. I had a bunch of technical issues here this morning with Wi-Fi, and I've got a little robot vacuum cleaner that wasn't behaving and all that stuff. And there were some moments of a little bit of frustration. I knew we had this podcast and my Wi-Fi was being weird. And so there was a little bit of moment of concern or worry. Mm-hmm. And I was noticing how no matter what was arising, it was being met with an unwavering peace. It's an interesting dynamic. We still get to have a human experience. It's just that we don't get pulled into it so deeply. We don't suffer around it.
Right. There's no resistance to what is happening in that moment. Maybe you're not happy with it. It's not an ideal scenario in that moment. You're still going to try to fix the Wi-Fi, but there's no internal resistance and struggle against what is going on.
Exactly. The peace remains. Right. So I feel it. I notice it. It doesn't actually grab me. It doesn't hook me and pull me away. It just arises because I'm in this human embodiment. And it doesn't last very long, and it doesn't have anywhere near the tenacity that it typically would have because the peace is unwavering. It's there. So we get to experience sadness, grief, frustration, anger. We get to experience the full range of emotion, knowing that the essence of our being is imperishable. It is not threatened.
Right.
That's, I think, the big thing. It's if we don't feel that sense of threat anymore, because we know ourselves to be the imperishable and boundless vast consciousness.
Right. Hey, I love how you basically had a meditative experience that arose just going through your day, right? Where these things external things are coming and going, but they're not gripping you. You're just kind of, being with whatever is going on.
That's nicely put. It is. What happens is all of life just becomes kind of a meditative moment.
Mm.
Um, Everything is an opportunity to see if we can love deeper. Everything,
Wow.
everything. Can we love deeper? Rumi, the poet Rumi,
Yeah.
has a beautiful poem that says, "Your task is not to seek for love. Your task is to seek for and find within you all the barriers you have built against it."
Wow.
Right? Just find the barriers. Meet the parts of you that are blocking, the parts of you that are still fearful, the parts of you that are still struggle with love, the
Mm.
parts of you that are still defended. Just keep finding those parts, meeting them, allowing them, loving
Mm.
them so that they can arise and pass and heal. And what you are, which is love, will blossom. It'll be there.
Right. I love that, because I think that most advice out there comes from a place of like, you are not okay as you are. You have to work on all these different things to become okay. But what you just stated there was that you are okay as you are, perfectly okay. You just got to get some of this gunk out of the way that's keeping you from being, who you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a, there's a teacher named Adyashanti, wonderful teacher, and I heard him speak one time, and he said, if you ask for anything, I want to be more loving. I want to be more loving. Life will say, okay, like really, are you sure?
Yeah.
Yes, really, of course, I want to be more loving, or I want to be more peaceful.
Yeah.
And life will say, all right, so let me show you all the ways you're not loving
Right.
by sending people into your life to show you where you still struggle with love.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Oh man. Um, okay, we could dig into that one all day, but I have a
Sure.
couple more questions for you, Chess. The first one being, okay, so a lot of the times when people put quotes in their email signatures, sometimes I go, because there's something like live, love, laugh, or
Right. So
over
I'm scared
cliche.
because I know I've got about 30 random ones that they randomly populate themselves at the end
Oh,
of my
do they? Okay,
emails.
they changed, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, this one that you had sent me in an email really made me go like, wow, that's a good
Mm.
one. Like this one is no live, love, laugh. This is this is different.
Yeah.
And it was this quote here: imagination is more important than knowledge. If you can imagine it, you can create it. Imagination is the dreamlike state where both the wild and the wonderful are possible, and it is from this realm that genius emerges.
Mm.
And so I love this, first of all, but can you tell us what the significance of imagination is to you?
Yeah. That inquiry that I mentioned earlier. What if I didn't have a story?
Right.
What we're doing is we're imagining. We're just playing in the moment. We're playing with imagine.
Hmm.
What would it feel like? And then that feeling, whatever's there, is more informative of the genius, more informative of the answer we're looking for.
Mm.
Um, when we're manifesting, let's say, in our lives and what we want to create, it's far more powerful rather than asking, what do I want it to look like?
Hmm.
Is what do I imagine it would feel like?
Oh, right.
What do I imagine I want my life to feel like?
Yeah.
And you let the mind open up to possibility. Um, I don't get answers. They come through my mind,
Hmm.
but for the most part, I don't get answers. Well, I take it back. They don't really actually come through the mind so much. The mind just interprets what my heart feels.
Mm-hmm.
In a contemplative or imaginative way of living, we play with possibility. We're asking beyond the mind's limited capacity to know anything.
Mm-hmm.
We feel into the vastness of consciousness, and we allow that knowing to come through, and then it's delivered to the mind to interpret, to put some words to it, basically.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we imagine with our hearts.
Oh, love it. Yeah.
We imagine with our hearts.
Right. And I think, just to piggyback off that, I think the mind and the ego is constantly looking for certainty. It's constantly looking for structure in the way that, the world operates. And by getting out of the head, and this is some of the power of meditation, and getting into the heart and opening ourselves up to, like you say, imagination, which stems from the heart. That's where the magic happens. That's where the real ideas and truth and the real knowledge, quote unquote, comes to us.
Yeah, because if I imagine only with my mind, or go to the mind for assessment of what's okay or possible,
Yeah.
I'm pretty quickly going to run into but, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, let me imagine into, what if it was like this? And I start to imagine it. And if I'm doing that primarily through the mind is going, but, and it's immediately coming up with, I can imagine the possibility, but I can imagine all the reasons why this might totally go wrong.
Right. Right.
And the heart is just saying, I just want to play. I just want to feel into this possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And once I align with what feels resonant,
Mm-hmm.
with my soul, if you will, with my true essence, then I can give it to the mind and say, so how can we make this so? Let the mind get engaged in the strategy, but let the heart be fully engaged in the realm of possibility.
Right.
And when we feel into a possibility and we say, yep, that's what feels right. That's what feels alive. And you can already notice the mind going, well, that's just crazy. So we stay in that space of the heart going, trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me, we're moving in this direction. And the mind, your job is not to decide whether this is the right thing or not. Your job is simply to help make it so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, magic. Love it. Okay, this is the final question that I ask all guests on the show. The question being, if you could send a message to the version of yourself who is at quote unquote rock bottom, what would that message be?
A good question. So when I'm at rock bottom, it would be, and it makes sense to me because of my practice, but it would be, remember who you really are.
Ooh.
Remember your eternal nature.
Right.
Remember your divine wholeness. Because right now you're struggling with your humanity. And it's very real in that regard. And there are things that are scary and to struggle with. But if I only know myself to be that, I'm going to struggle a lot longer and a lot deeper. And there's going to be more suffering. But if I can pull out and remember the grace, the unwavering grace of being, that it's like that loving parent that just holds their arms open and says to the scared child, I've got you.
Right.
Go ahead and be scared. Work through what you're working through. Go ahead. I'm going to hold the loving space. So it would be, remember that you are the love, the imperishable, unwavering love within which you are having a challenging human experience.
Right. I love that answer. I think what you're saying there in a way is that, like, when you say you're struggling with humanity, it's that, like, what's going on in your human experience is not very pleasant right now. You may not be happy with who you are and what's going on, the events that are taking place in your life, but remembering that that's not who you are. that you're actually that, like you say, unwavering being, I think is how you put it.
Yeah. You're the unwavering grace of being.
Grace of, oh, oh.
That's what we are. That's what we are. And we collapse into the dream of self that the mind is making up with its, again, because if I'm really struggling with something, it's typically because I'm identified with a small version of myself that
Mm,
fears and has a sense of lack and is going, oh, yep, see, my unworthiness is going to be exposed, or my
mhm.
people are going to see me for who I am, or I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to fail.
Right.
And I wanted to just make sure I get this quote in from Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah.
He wrote the poem If. It's an epic, beautiful poem. And one of the lines is, if we can meet both our triumphs and disasters and treat them both as the imposters that they are.
Wow.
The imperishable grace of being is at peace
Hmm.
with, oh yeah, that failure, I'm going to learn from that. And
Right.
that success doesn't, don't get all attached to the success, because it's only aggrandizing an egoic self, and you're more than that.
And that's a good point. It's not just not identifying with the lows, but also not identifying with the highs equally
Yeah,
so.
because they're going to come and go too.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster, man.
Right. Right.
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this, Chess. This has been amazing. You're a poet with your words. And where can our audience go to connect with you, follow you? And
Mm,
obviously, we mentioned the gift at the beginning of the show. If you can just talk about what the gift is, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes.
beautiful. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, man. I just so appreciate anybody who's leading with such courage and curiosity, and
Oh, thank
and
you.
and willing to slow down and say, what am I chasing?
Yeah,
Where do I think I'm going? Everything
right.
I'm looking for, I already am. So I appreciate the fact that you're being such a loving champion in this space.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
you're welcome. Uh, my website is chessedwards.com. So CHESS Edwards.com. And the gift that I've got there, and you'll supply the link. It's a gift to some free meditations. I've got about a dozen meditations. Some of them are as simple as, there's one called the Three Bells Meditation. And it's awesome for somebody who's just starting and says, I have a hard time sitting and just being a little bit quiet.
Mm,
So, as simple as just listening to a simple meditation that allows a little bit of stillness, all the way to another one, which is called The Powerful Truth of You,
ooh,
which is about leaving the mind outside and looking and feeling into, when I'm truly not constructing a me in my mind,
yeah.
what's there. I still exist. So what is that?
Right, right.
So that's what the gift is. I really recommend people go through and try them out, and the different ones. They're going to find different meditations that meet them where they are in their journey.
Mm. Amazing. I can't wait for myself to try these meditations. I feel like you have a very therapeutic voice. And as I mentioned, a way with words. So I would imagine, without having tried them yet, that these meditations are stellar.
Yeah, thank you. They're a foundation. They're a start. And then my favorite work is, of course, anyone who comes to Sedona to spend
Ooh,
3 days with me. I do private retreats, and I've got a beautiful suite here attached to my sanctuary. And people come, and it's just me and them for 3 days, going on hikes, doing our explorations, teaching meditations, and it's an intensive for opening up the true nature of our being. Oh, and by
awesome.
the way, can I show some javelina just showed up in the backyard?
Oh, yes,
Can I
please.
show? So let me see if I can make this work here. Let me know.
Oh, no way. What are those called?
They're called javelina.
Javelina. Wow. They're big boys.
Yeah, those are actually juveniles right there.
What? Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So this is where the work happens. Right?
Oh man, just had to show off the view one more time, eh?
Just one more time. Exactly. Oh, a couple little babies just showed up. Oh, very fun.
Amazing.
Ah,
All
it's been a
right, my
treat,
man.
Mitch.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thank you, brother.